All right, let's use here now. All right, we got 19 in the meeting here. Let's quickly. So, is anyone having any issues checking into archive? Besides
always.
Besides Abby. Just go ahead and throw in the chat real quick. You're here. I'm not gonna. All right. So Jordan needs to be. Yeah, all right, that's good. Yeah, you're there. I got you present already, Jordan. So if you're not able to check in or whatever, just please just ping me real quick, and I'll just go ahead and mark you, and then we'll get going.
Professor, are we going to be coding on the garden website, the Grid Garden?
Yeah, I asked everyone to download the zip file, unzip it, and then right-click on the folder and open in code, and open that folder in code, and then you can follow along and play around as I go through it as well.
I mean the Grid Garden website. Are we doing any coding in that website?
Oh, the CSSGrid Garden. That's a game, and you're going to be doing that after I finish talking about grid.
Oh,
give you about 30 minutes or so, maybe a little more, to do that in class. And first couple to finish might get a prize. There we go. Kind of prize, I don't know. Virtual prize, I'll have to figure that out.
Is it the Grid Garden game?
Yeah.
Oh, I already finished that. So
Some of you might have already done it.
And
so if you already done it, you can sort of check out, or you can help others.
Okay.
Usually I do it in class, and like people can sort of sit next to each other and work on. I mean, I don't mind people getting help with it, working on it. But when you're online, you're sort of on your own. So perhaps we'll see how we go today. I don't want people to get stuck. It's kind of a fun exercise. All right, let's. So no one else has responded. I'm going to go ahead and just say that. All right, 58% in class. Interesting. 58% here, and we went in class exercise. All right. Well, let's go ahead. Let's share my screen. Okay, so you learned this week about Flexbox and CSSGrid. We're going to spend time on CSSGrid today, and we got a little exercise on a similar exercise for Tuesday on Flexbox. So don't do that one yet, okay? But in this section on page layout, I want to just talk a little bit about fixed and fluid layout, just layout in general. All right. So in the past, you might see sites. Let's see. I think I'll bring one up here real quick that I know is similar to that. You're looking at CNN.com. Okay. We've talked about responsivity, right? So, as this site as we get smaller here, the site's going to respond, right? So this is called a responsive website. Okay. CSSGrid and Flexbox really allow you to easily write, do a website that actually is responsive by default. And you can do some fine grain control on that in CSSGrid and Flexbox. But you look at here, as I make this huge, the maximum width here looks like, let's look at this real quick. I'll look at their outside container here. Oh, are they just doing, what are they doing on there? I'm not going to go try to decode their CSS. All right. But in the past, I mean, you see lots of sites where the width is kind of fixed. In other words, the maximum width in this case. So it's usually 960 pixels. That's kind of sort of the standard in the industry. That works good for large large screens as well as laptops. And so that's sort of this arbitrary, number that they picked. Let's go back here. Here, fine. So fixed 960 pixels. Again, that's kind of a industry standards. All right. So a lot of sites do 960 pixels fixed width, and then you look here. So fixed one. When you make a bigger screen, it just stays 960, and you add space on the left and right. Okay. And of course, you guys can do that with any sort of div or any area by just doing margin 0 auto, like I taught you guys before. Okay. But if you make the window smaller, you're just going to see a scroll bar. We don't really like scroll bars generally. Okay. So the fixed layout is sort of out of style. All right, especially in nowadays when we want to really design for both mobile and desktop at the same time. So fluid layout, you can see here, if we use percentages in our CSS, okay, I make this, it's percentage of this screen width. And so 100% always fills the screen width. Again, 70% always fills 70% of the screen width. Okay, that's a fluid layout. All right. All right. First of all, any feedback on Flexbox and CSS, CSSGrid in general, since we haven't really, we're not going to dive into Flexbox today. We're going to do that next week. What's your impression of CSSGrid? Just go ahead and open mic session. Go.
I love it, especially the grid area. I think is awesome.
Yeah, the grid areas for me is like it's the best CSS tag ever developed. So. Yeah, I know, it's awesome. All right. Anyone else have any comments? I like more interaction, folks.
I thought it was really interesting and how easily they could embed 2 different views depending on screen size, like a 700 minimum pixel width for them to view a desktop, and anything smaller than that, it's automatically by default a mobile screen. Right.
Yep. Cool. Any other comments?
I like that you can put this the gaps between the grid.
Yep.
And you don't have to put the gap all around the grid, just where you need it, which is between the grid marks. And so I thought that was a cool feature to have.
Okay. More comments?
I just like how intuitive it is, because we've been around grids, since grade school. And so the fact that you can just pick it up and start using it's really nice.
Right. You used to play Foursquare, whatever. I mean, yeah, you're right. The grid is something that's very simple. I mean, so how many of you have heard of Bootstrap? Have we heard of Bootstrap before? Raise your hand if you have used or heard of Bootstrap. Okay, maybe. All right, so Abby, Jordan, I see you raising your hand. Can you explain what Bootstrap is, basically? One of you?
I just raised my hand because I've heard of it. I've heard the name.
Heard of it. Does anyone know what it is?
Isn't it just like a framework? but it's a pretty popular framework
Yeah.
that people like to use a lot.
I'm not
because
gonna. Yeah, excellent. It's a popular framework, CSS framework, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, doesn't it include like CSS, JS, and HTML? Like it's
Yes,
got
it
stuff
does.
for all three of them.
Yep. Okay. It actually is a library. Let's see. So I'm showing you getbootstrap.com. All right. Let's go to just some examples. And let's just show you. So basically there's these custom components that you can, well, there's basic CSS, nav bars, button bars, you can, like, for example, this checkout form, all this nice layout, the rounded corners, the inputs, this little prepended thing. Those are all things that are sort of built in or super easy to do in Bootstrap. So it allows you to do a responsive UI. Okay. As you see this, right? As I get smaller, same thing. I was talking about the first name and last name go on top of each other. Okay, all that's automatic. So it's similar to what we're talking about with like CSSGrid and Flexbox. CSSGrid and Flexbox, they are just core low-level CSS tags and features. Okay, so CSSGrid will allow you to lay out a really nice overall layout for your site that's responsive. Okay, Bootstrap does the same thing, but Bootstrap also adds a whole bunch more. Okay, so a custom CSS, these nice little radio buttons, these specialized checkboxes. All right, let's go back. Even though I'm not going to make you implement Bootstrap this semester, it's good to be familiar with it. Let's go. It has an automatic carousel, function, so you can just drop that in, put your content in there, and you've seen sites that do this, right? A lot of sites do the little carousel thing. Okay. Has these little sort of card components. See if I got it's got a built-in nav bar, so that like the navigation and the search bar, that's all sort of built in. Like, and I get smaller here, watch. The nav automatically does the hamburger menu that you see, right? When you get to mobile size, they'll have the hamburger menu. You go bigger, you have your full menu. So again, it enables you to do responsive things, right? And more interactive things much more easily, okay? And this nav bar is driven by not only CSS, but JavaScript as well. So they built these interactive components, okay, that you can use and drop in to create, if you're getting started with a site, right, you can go and download a template, so they have templates down here. Yeah, they have these like Bootstrap themes, for example. I can go actually and look at these Bootstrap themes. Let's say I'm a developer and I don't know where to start. And maybe I'm just a developer. I'm developing something. I don't have a graphic designer, because usually, bigger companies and, you'll have a graphic designer help you sort of with, or a UX designer even these days, come and help you as a developer develop something that looks pretty, looks nice. Well, here for $49, okay. Actually, let's live preview. I can purchase this Bootstrap theme. Okay. Let's go back. Okay. Yeah, let's go back. Oh, there it is. Okay. So they get, let's say, and I've done this multiple times. I have a favorite one. It's called Smart Admin that I use. But you have a client that wants to build a dashboard. Well, why don't you go and pay $50? I mean, can you imagine how much time and effort it's going to take to develop this sort of thing? We've got a search bar, we got a nav, we've got, actually, I'll show you Smart Admin, actually. Smart Admin is my favorite one. So Bootstrap aside, the fact that the industry has been using it since like 2007 or 8, okay, and tons of the sites out there are Bootstrap. You know, you're gonna want to get familiar with it, especially when you go out in the industry. We cover it in detail, and you use it in Web 2 quite substantially. I pulled it out of Web 1 because I was just giving sort of too many different things in Web 1. And I think CSSGrid and Flexbox are going to be awesome, actually, for you to learn and not get confused by Bootstrap at the time. Bootstrap 4 right now actually is built on Flexbox. Okay, it used to be built on floats. Okay, as far as layout's concerned, but this is my favorite template. I've actually purchased this template. I've had it for years. I've used it for like 4 projects. And nice thing about these things is, you know, you can build dashboards. They got a calendar, right? You just drop in the calendar, right? You have all the different sort of chart types and things like that. You've got, oh, let's go up here. Dynamic things that you can do. You know, for example, you can say fixed header, okay? Or turn it off. Well, fixed header means when I scroll, oh, come on. Header fixed. Anyway, you can modify this. You can apply themes. They've got a default, you know, alerts, accordions, breadcrumbs, button groups. These are similar to, you know, Bootstrap. You've got all the form stuff you want to do. You got these all these different tables, and all you need to do is you go in there and you say, okay, I like this. This is cool. I like this one. You go into the code and you can then just use that table as is, right? And so, you know, as much as I like you guys to build stuff from scratch, and I will have you do that in Web 1 and Web 2 so you understand things, there are great frameworks out there that will do a lot of this stuff for you and will give you a lot of power. So when you go to build applications, again, if you know these tools, you can be more effective. All right, let's go. It's 10:20 already. Aye. Okay, let's see here. Let's go. Okay, so if you have your CSSGrid playlist loaded up, you have all these lessons. Again, these are good. Having code like this is good reference for you. But just remember, so initially, layouts were done using floats. Okay. So I've got a layout. Looks like a nice layout. Okay, so header, side, main, nav, great. But I used float sort. Let's go look at the code. Let's go look at my code. Okay, so my code says I got a content, I got a header, then I got a middle section, and then I've got a main, and I've got another sidebar section that has 2 divs inside of that. Okay, so there's, you know, I got to build a hierarchy here to build my my overall layout, which is okay, and that's how we've always done it. All right. But I'm using, again, in this case, I'm using floats. Let's go in here. Main is float right. Okay. The middle section. Okay. Where is it? Float middle pound up. Okay, the sidebar floats left. Okay. All right, so it's all in the middle section. So let's look at this. I've got a middle, which basically is just a regular div, and by default it fills the whole screen. Then inside that, I said, well, I want main, and I'm going to make it float. I'm going to make it float left, or maybe right, and I want the sidebar to float right. Main's going to float right, sidebar is going to float left. Inside the sidebar, I just have these two regular divs. Okay, and so that works pretty well. The pain with floats is if I'm floating something here, any content afterwards is going to have a real hard time, okay? And I'm not going to, basically, if you use floats and you don't know about clearing floats, the rest of your content can sort of get screwed up too. So what you need to do, I'm using floats here, then I need to clear the floats left and right so that the content following doesn't get screwed up, because with floats, you're kind of detached from the DOM a little bit, or from the view, right? He's sort of floating free. The rest of the content can get screwed up. I guess it would be nice to have a nice example of that, but here you need to do middle, after, display block, clear both. So you turn the display off, into block. You make sure that everything after the float section is display block, and then you clear the floats again so that the floats aren't going to apply to the what's coming after. So that's something that could just cause you pain and suffering all day long. All right. Now the sidebar was a width 40%, so we're using percentages, which is nice. Okay, and the main is 60%. Okay, so this is actually, let's see. Well, actually, let's see whether it. Yeah, you see, so it is slightly responsive. Okay, because of the percentages. All right, let's go out of here now. Okay, Flexbox came around. Flexbox is cool too. You can do layouts with Flexbox, and it really doesn't hurt. But again, with Flexbox, here, look here also, I need to create my hierarchy here. Okay. And I have the middle is display flex. Okay. And here I'm saying I want the sidebar to sort of be, let's see, well, sidebar and main. Main's gonna be twice as big as the sidebar. Okay. So again, let's just run that one. Same thing, pretty nice, okay? And it's somewhat, again, I can make this somewhat responsive. Enter CSSGrid. So, first of all, CSSGrid doesn't really replace Flexbox. In fact, Flexbox has its sort of advantages, and CSSGrid has its advantages. Can anyone here comment on what you think the advantages or differences between Flexbox and Grid are just after you've sort of just learned the basics? What's the main difference?
Is it easier to do custom content in a Flexbox than in a Grid?
Right. Very good. Okay, so here's my suggestion. When I'm creating my layout, so that's the first thing I do. So when you create your website a little later, you're going to want to first just create your layout, okay, and get something again. Then you're just going to be, I'm going to be putting stuff inside here, inside nav, inside main, inside my footer. I might want to align them. I might want to, do a bunch of manipulation with them. I recommend using CSSGrid for the overall layout, and then Flexbox within these containers to do the really fine, alignment, right? All the kind of stuff that you do with Flexbox that's actually quite cool, right? It allows you to sort of really work and align and form your content inside the main sections. So that's so I would use Flexbox inside my header, right? That sort of thing. For laying out, it's better for laying out rows, whereas Grid, is better for laying out grids. Flexbox works, sort of wrapping around, right? So if I had, a big container here, I would have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'd have these 1, 2, 3 divs, right? And as long as they're, and then he'd be 100%, so he would wrap around in the next one, right? This area would wrap, would be here, and then basically it just wraps on a row basis, and that's kind of useful. But when you're constructing a layout or a grid, the grid's much more convenient. All right. All right. First of all, real quick, I need to go grab something. I'll be right back. 1 minute break. You can take a little break too if you'd like. All right, now it's got really dry. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. All right, so again, in general, the way you do Flexbox, again, I would use it inside the main sort of grid containers. I'm going to skip past that one. So I'm going to jump to grid. Let's just talk about some of the ways that you can use grid. Okay, so I got grid template columns, repeat 3, 1FR. So that's going to be obviously three equal size columns. That 1FR, that's 1 fraction. Okay. So in this case, I've got, in this case, I would have 3 columns. This is 2 fractions, sorry, of the screen. Okay, so it's twice as big as the other 2. Okay. Here I've got a max width 960 and I do margin 0 auto. This is sort of my fixed centered layout. All right. I want my max width to be 960. Go ahead.
I just wondering about the repeat. Is there a maximum number that you could do on those repeats? Or?
No. Oh, so good point, Rafael. With Bootstrap, for example, it's a column-based framework as well. But Bootstrap, it gives you 12 columns, and you have to sort of do all your layout in multiples or divisors of 12. Okay, so whereas with grid, you can put 100 columns. Okay, I want to make it really fine grained. I want this column to be 35% of this, whatever. I could give it 35 columns out of 100. I mean, you can do it that way. All right, but generally, you're not doing that. So you could have, and you don't want to. With Bootstrap, you're sort of forced to start. You always have 12 to start with, and you got to divide it up. Here, I can say I want 2 columns, period, and done. All right. So this one's sort of an easy one. Let's see, background name. Okay. 3 columns. Let's see here. And they're all equal size. Again, we can go and inspect. Play with that. We can go to the CSS, for example. Okay, so if I do 1, right, 1, 2, 1, so the second one is, and if I do this one, 30, 20, 50. Right, so 30%, 20%, 50%. Percentages are very good, especially when you are. So percentages with a max width, that can be an approach that you take. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a fixed width here at all. Sometimes you don't want your UI to stretch to 3,000 pixels wide. It can look really, really weird. And again, that's why sort of CNN they said they limited it at 960. But again, you can make your app, if it makes sense, expand and stretch much wider, right? But that's sort of just industry standard there. Margin 0 auto, really handy. Okay, without that, I'm just like a regular div. I'm going to be left centered. Margin 0 auto says, okay, just always stuff it in the middle. Remember that. That's just a handy thing. All right, let's go back. As we progress through here, I'm going to go maybe a little faster. Grid template columns. Okay, now we're introducing grid template rows. Okay, I want 3 rows. Okay. Min max 150 pixel autos. Can anyone tell me what that means?
It means that the minimum height for the minimum rows, yeah. So the minimum height for the row will be 150 pixels, and then once it goes past that, it'll switch the height to auto.
Okay, great. Excellent. Let's see what happens if I do if I don't have that. Let's just go ahead and let's comment this out. Well, right now, of course, let's go. Okay, so I have 3. See, how many columns I want? 3, repeat 3. So this is basically going to be, hang on a sec, let's go, do I have a height, max width, channel background, padding 30 pixels. Oh, all these guys have 30 pixel padding. Okay. Go back in here. Let's do this on the fly. And let's do, okay. Grid template rows, 3 min. So let's watch what happens here. Oh, okay. So these guys had 30 pixels of padding in here, but we wanted the minimum height to be 150. Just that was what we determined. Okay, so that again, that's what I do here. Min max 150 auto. Okay. Here let's see, grid auto rows is another thing you can do. Okay. Grid template rows allows me to specify for each one, but this one I've done repeat 3 min max 0 auto. That works well. Okay, questions on that? All right. Let's move on.
So again, with the 150, you say is min and max 150, or is it 0 to 150?
Oh, so min max means 150 minimum height. So you see these only had 30 pixel padding, so it would have been 60 high. We wanted it to be 150 high by default. So that's the height. Okay.
And then auto just kicks in after that.
Yeah, auto after that, so auto's this. Look, see this guy right here. The content pushes the height higher, right? Higher than 150. Okay, but there's no content. These just have no content except for the one little number. Okay, and so normally well, let's see. I'll take off this 7 and 8. Get out here 7 and 8. Nine. Oh, anyway. Move on. Let's go. Grid template columns, grid gap. So that just gives you the gap between the grids. Again, really nice to have that automatically set up. Oh, let's go here quickly to the Zybooks chapter and just really quickly talk about grid. Where is it? Item placement. A CSS grid. There's these grid numbers, grid lines. Okay. And so a 3-column grid is going to have 4 grid lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 row lines, 1, 2, 3, 4 for a 3-row grid. Okay. So if it's 4 rows, it's going to be 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. These are important because when you go and lay things out in a grid, right, as you can tell, you can say grid row 1/3, grid column 1/4, and you'll be able to place your div anywhere on any size grid, which is really nice. So you can do really complex and interesting layouts that way. Let's go. Nothing too interesting there. I'm going to go ahead and skip past. Let's go to grid auto rows, grid gap. Oh, first of all, let's go down here real quick to content. Notice with CSS Grid, I have one main container, and then I don't have any hierarchy at all. And that's sort of the first thing that you notice between Flexbox, Float, and everyone else. Right? Your content of your application becomes so much easier. I don't have to have a whole bunch of hierarchical, embedded divs here, there, right? All, and manage my layout, my grid, my rows all myself. I just have my content, and then the CSS Grid goes flat and just takes each of those divs and stuffs them out there, right? Where I want them. So again, really handy. Let's go. Let's see. Self-center. So here we got some alignment. Let's go look at this one. Okay. Looks like I've got 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. We're going to align self-end, justify self-start. Align self-center, justify center. Let's go look at what that does. All right. So really cool things you can do here. So I've got one big row here, but I'm able to align these guys, okay, within the row. Okay, so let's look at this real quick. Okay. So div 1, padding 30 pixels, align self end. So align self, in this case, end is the bottom. It should be a little clearer, okay? Justify self start. Justify is start. Okay, so it's going to be to the left. Okay. 2, let's see. Oh no, that was, okay. 2 has align self center. Justify self center. 3, okay. Align self start, which is the top. Justify self end, okay. And so that's gonna push that over. Now let's see here. Any questions on that? Okay. So within this, you see within this grid layout, these divs can kind of reside there. The auto, see the auto 150 auto rows to all 3. Let's look at these guys. Let's go back here. All right, we only got a few more minutes. I'm gonna get you guys working on this garden exercise. Depends how much time we have. Maybe I'll have you guys just do it on your own. We'll see. So here I got 12 columns. Again, min max auto, grid gap 10, margin auto, position relative. Grid column 1/13. Okay. So that is 1, the beginning. So it's 12 columns. So 13 is going to be the end. So that's going to be full width for the header. Main is going to start at the 4th, okay, which is the beginning of the 4th column, okay, and go to 13, which is the end of the 12th column. All right, grid row, same thing, 2, 4. So it's going to stretch from grid line 2 to grid line 4. Okay. So there's 12 columns, and you don't see all the, let's look at it real quick. I can see the columns as I hover over this. Okay. Again, so the aside, let's see, the that section, we start at 1, goes to 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. The main starts at 1, 2, 3, 4, and goes to 13. Right, which is the end. So again, that's, you just need to make sure that you understand that 1 is the very left edge. Okay. And the column line at the end is going to be the number of columns, 12 plus 1. What they did here, which was pretty cool, again, just this little checkbox here, which kind of shows you the grids. What they did was an overlay. So they had that one positioned relatively, and then they just stuff it, let it sit over the other grid, and then they turn it on and off. That's such a fun one to look at. I'm not gonna gonna delve too much more on that one. But what they did there is they did the background transparent. That's kind of fun, actually fun little CSS thing. Let's look at that. So I have two grids here. This grid has same thing, okay? Background, padding, transparent, okay? Position absolute, padding 0. Let's see, how did I get my little grid line? And then the P tags in there had a border, 1 pixel, background, black, margin 0, opacity 0.2. And so we did let's look at that real quick. So I've laid a grid over this, but how do I see the background? Okay, that's sort of the trick here, right? I want to be able to see the background. Let's look here. Let's look at my content. Let's see, where's my overlaying grid? Oh, header main section now. Okay, so the first grid lays these guys out. The second grid just has sort of empty P tags, 12 of them, all right, with lines, okay? And they have an opacity of 0.2, means that 80%, it can be so 80% of what's behind it will see through, okay? Let's go make this opacity of 0.8. Whoops. 0.8. And you see that the background doesn't really show through. So we made it black background, but the opacity was 20%. And so the background was able to bleed through and be seen. Okay, stop that. So 0.5. Again, I can sort of see 50% of what's, or 50% bleeds through. Okay, really handy thing to know about. Okay, is a transparency and opacity. Opacity again is how much of the background is going to bleed through to be seen. Okay. All right. Let's go. Get to the fun stuff real quick, and then if we have time, we'll start on the grid garden exercise probably, and I'll change the due time to not be so strict on you, and you can finish it a little later if you want to. All right, so I want to get through this. Okay, so I have another one, content grid. This is all pretty standard stuff now, right? We understand that? Okay. Now I've created these classes. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again,